be a useless camera.
That'd be pretty funny.
All right.
So
So let's start this poem, whether you got it or thought you got it or were totally confused. We're going to go through it for the whole class today. There's a lot of different access points with it. Hopefully, no matter what happened, you pulled a lot of one-liners out of it because it's just full of these kind of gorgeous lines. But it starts in a different language. So who translated that language? Oh, thanks, Ellen.
Okay, so I did it with Google Translate, so I don't know if it's like the most accurate, but I did translate one of the words. So what I got is, if I believed that my reply was made to one who never returned to the world, this stereo flame no longer shock, but because never from this depth did any come back alive, I did translate this word, the truth, without fear of infamy I answer.
Yeah, and that's pretty close to what I have in this T.S. Eliot book here. Did you find out what it was from?
I looked it up, but I forgot it.
Anybody? Nobody looked it up? Just like, other language. Don't need it.
Yeah.
I trust
English class, we speak English.
I could argue
So it is from
It's like Dante.
Dante. Yeah, do you know what Dante wrote?
No.
Dante's Inferno.
So how did you know it was Dante?
I looked it up, but I remembered it was Dante, but I forgot the rest of it.
Dante's
Yeah.
Inferno.
And you're saying Dante's Inferno. Now, do you guys
Oh,
know what
yeah.
Dante's Inferno is, or does it just seem like a phrase that's in your head somewhere?
Yeah,
Hey.
it's the latter.
Yeah.
Isn't it like a series of books about like every level of hell, something like that?
Yeah.
And like
So
Cthulhu's and everything.
it's an epic poem, and it's 3 parts. It's the Inferno, which is hell. It's Purgatorio, which is purgatory, and then Paradiso, which is heaven. And it's a living guy taking the tour of the afterlife.
Cool.
But this particular part is from the Inferno. So this part is in hell. And it does say, it was close to Emma, if you want to listen. If I thought that my reply were to be someone who would ever return to the world, this flame would be still, without further motion. But since no one has ever returned alive from this depth, if what I hear is true, I answer you without fear of shame. The one interesting thing it does give us is, and the very first line already begs a question, right? What's the first line of this poem?
Let's go then, you and
Let us go then, you and I. So that's the first question you got to have about this poem, right? Who is you? Who is I? Because the poem never really makes it fully clear. So any opinions? Josh?
Well, I is probably J. Alfred Prufrock.
Yeah, so we assume because of the title of the poem, even though the name Prufrock never shows up in the poem at all,
Yeah.
and it's really not a love song in any sort of way, we can assume from the title that Prufrock is the I. Yeah.
I think that you is someone that is aside from the people that he says later on. He's like, he like talk. He's like, I know they're gonna say, oh, look how his hair is thin and how his like arms are skinnier. I think it's someone that's an aside from that group of people that he's probably closer to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and maybe it makes more sense later on. Now, I think the most difficult part about this poem is the first 2 stanzas. First, actually, 3 or 4. Every time the yellow smoke appears, that's the one part of this poem I can't really. I myself don't have a great answer to. So we're going to read these 2 stanzas, and I want to hear what you guys say. I've heard a million different interpretations of the yellow smoke. Now let's think about just what sort of images are brought to the attention of the reader here and what effect they have on us before the poem gets a little more specific later on. So let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky like a patient eat the rised upon a table. Let us go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless night and one-night cheap hotels and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells, streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent to lead you to an overwhelming question. Oh, do not ask, what is it? Let us go and make our visit in the room. Women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. So just to start there, what is going on?
No idea.
So, we don't know what's going on, so what can we derive as meaning if we don't know what's happening narratively?
It's kind of someone like looking back on their life and all those, I guess, little things that didn't really
Yeah, so you said looking back. Why do we feel like we're looking back on something? Why does it feel like we're at the end of something?
Well, just kind of the way that, like the way that I can't get the word, like the tense of the verbs that they use, especially in the beginning,
Mhm.
is all like past tense, like you're talking about something that already happened,
Mm-hmm.
and, yeah.
Anyone else? Think of that same question. Why does this feel like we're in the end of something as we read the next stanza as well? The yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes, the yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window panes, licked its tongue into the corners of the evening, linger upon the pools that stand in drains, let fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys, slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and seeing that it was a soft October night, curled once about the house and fell asleep. Kate?
It kind of seems like the author is like familiar with things that happen, like with the yellow smoke. Like he's talking about the yellow smoke as if he's already experienced it, which because it like the way he says like the yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window things. He's not saying the yellow the yellow fog is rubbing its back upon the pane. It's like it's here in the moment. It seems like he's already familiar with it and knows that it's happened, so
Mm-hmm.
that makes it seem like it's either happening currently and like it's like a break in time, or it's over.
Yeah, and think of the different images here that arise to say that it's over, like Cade says. What time of day is it?
Night.
When the evening is spread out against the sky. What time of year is it? October. These are two images right on the precipice of the ending of something, right? Fall is the end of the year going into winter. Evening is the end of the day going into night. And so both these things, if you're using them in terms of a metaphorical image for a lifespan or for a person, it means we're sort of at the end of a life, looking back on something. And that's why we get that feeling, like Emma said, of looking back on a life here. Michael?
Well, it almost seemed like kind of creepy, and after it said October, it almost sounded like Halloween.
Yeah. Why? Just because it's October?
Just because it's October, and like that's just like the way they're talking, like just the tone.
You're going to go as Prufrock for Halloween?
Yeah.
Will?
And also with like October, it also, when you're saying like leads into winter, especially like, I guess, winter was always almost known as like a death because
Yeah.
like it was so bad
Right.
usually.
The
so.
changing seasons are the perfect metaphor for a lifespan, right? Your spring youth, your summer adulthood, your twilight years of fall, and then you die. Winter is coming.
The way they talk of the fog makes it seem kind of like more of an entity than just something of nature.
Mhm.
Like, so like what I kind of was thinking of, like it might represent, just because the way they talk about it seems to be a really negative thing, the fog.
Yeah.
So it's probably, I think it might represent some of the struggles and challenges he's had through his life,
Mhm.
and it's not just fog, it's like the being of evil or something like that.
Yeah, and because it's personified in a few different ways, it's curling about things. It does take on this form of an entity. There's another image I want to think of to just get, what happens is in these first two paragraphs, you just establish the subjects. Instead of like an exposition for a narrative that would be established in the beginning, T.S. Eliot here establishes different subjects and then explores them later. So they don't make a ton of sense early on, it's just kind of getting them in your head. And so something like the third line, like a patient etherized upon a table, that simile conveys a certain meaning, a certain idea. And what is that? You know what etherized means? Or you know what ether is?
You're under.
Yeah, it's nice.
It's like,
Means that you're.
like being anesthetized. I know that's not a word that's going to help. Etherized.
It means that you're
Anesthetized,
under.
put down, yeah, put under by
Oh,
But you're still kind of,
by gas.
you're still kind of conscious, but then you don't really
Yeah.
have any, you can start
Laughing
hallucinating.
Yeah, laughing at, the stuff they give you so that you aren't awake during surgery or something, right? So anyway, that image then of a patient etherized upon a table, what meanings does that convey? If you're using that as a metaphor, not literally, the practicality of being etherized.
It's a quiet, still, it's kind of sleepy.
Yeah. Quiet, sleepy, Jackson?
Helpless.
Helpless, yeah. If we're thinking this from the I, from the self, he's in a space where he can't move. He's anesthetized completely, right? What were you going to say, Morgan?
I was just gonna say, like, you have no control over stuff, what's
Right.
happening.
No control, just, frozen in place. Alive, but incapable of doing anything. Kate?
Like being completely vulnerable, but not being able to do anything about the situation you're in.
Yeah. Being vulnerable, not being able to do anything about the situation you were in. And that is going to be a huge theme running forward with the rest of this poem. So think about those ideas, this sort of setting of the evening, the October evening, and this idea of being etherized upon a table. Now, the first access point of this poem, because there are a few access points for you to kind of understand or give some characters, almost your own imaginative characters, to who the you and I might be or could be. And so the first one, I think, is let us go and make our visit. In the room, women come and go, talking of Michelangelo.
And that comes up.
So this is the first time that gives you almost like a movie image of what is happening in this poem. And there's not a lot of those access points, but they are there. So what do you imagine when you hear those lines? Just, what image comes to your head when you hear those lines, in the room, women come and go, talking of Michelangelo?
Well, I think of it as obviously like a past time, like it was not present day, it was like a while ago, and it's like, I don't know, almost like a social event in a way. That's what I imagine.
Something that proof rock is at this social event,
Yeah,
that the speaker is at.
he's like entering this social event.
Yeah. It's the first time it's easy to imagine him as a human entity in the poem, right? Debbie?
Almost, I feel like you almost think of like a book club or like an adult tea party, because like it does.
An adult tea party.
Yeah.
Ooh.
They're
So just a
I've never
tea
been to
party.
an adult tea party, I
well,
guess.
it's like
Yeah.
a book club, I guess, but like they're just talking about.
Mm-hmm. In the room, women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. And so they're just, having some sort of sophisticated conversation about, this Italian painter and sculptor.
Or it's an art museum.
What?
Or it's an art museum.
Right.
Where they're in.
But the point is, we know who I is, right?
Yeah. No, not really.
We don't know who you is. And so all we have so far is our I sitting and watching women come and go, talking of Michelangelo.
Kind of weird.
Right. Is he engaging in conversation with these people?
He's just
No.
viewing.
He's looking back.
Right.
That's what makes you think that.
And he puts that in such a strange spot too.
Right. It's just thrown in the middle. That's what makes this difficult to decipher. T.S. Eliot is a modernist writer, and the modernist poets really sort of explored how you could change poetry and dealing with the abstract, and that's why this one isn't quite as easy to decipher as the other poems. It's also a much higher vocabulary level. But anyway, let's keep going on, now that we have those ideas in our head, and that access point of a guy just watching women come and go, talking of Michelangelo.
Rise.
And indeed there will be time for the yellow smoke that slides along the street, rubbing its back upon the window panes. There will be time to prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet. There will be time to murder and create, and time for all the works and days of hands that lift and drop a question on your plate. Time for you and time for me, and time yet for 100 indecisions, and for 100 visions and revisions before the taking of a toast and tea. In the room, women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. And indeed, there will be time to wonder, do I dare, and do I dare, Time to turn back and ascend the stair with a bald spot in the middle of my hair. They will say how his hair is growing thin. My morning coat, my collar mounting firmly to the chin, my necktie rich and modest, but asserting by a simple pin. They will say, but how his arms and legs are thin. Do I dare disturb the universe? In a minute there is time for decisions and revisions, within a minute will reverse, for I have known them all already, known them all. I've known the evenings, mornings, afternoons, I've measured out my life with coffee spoons. I know the voices dying with a dying fall, beneath the music from a farther room, so how should I presume? Johnny?
Do you have the poster thing?
So hopefully you realize there's one line in that whole section that feels very central to this poem. And it looks that way in the actual text, and it feels that way when you're reading it. And what line am I talking about?
Do
I dare disturb the universe? That's a pretty big question, right? So taking it in context with all these other lines, there will be time yet for 100 indecisions and 100 visions and revisions before the taking of a toast and tea. Set against that context, again, of In the Room, Women Come and Go, talking of Michelangelo, what do you think he is talking about? Well?
Well, on a very simple level, we can determine that he's trying to decide whether to do something or not.
Yeah. Right.
So.
He's not trying to decide whether to do something or not. And I think the way you access this poem depends on what you think he is trying to do. And I don't think that what he is trying to do really matters all that much, as long as you understand this paralyzed indecision. Remember, he is anesthetized, etherized upon a table, can't do anything. And then he says, time for you, and time for me, and time yet for 100 indecisions and 100 visions and revisions before the taking of the toast and tea. So what do you imagine as his indecision? What do you imagine he is undecided about? Or what do you relate to of being undecided about? Yeah.
Well, like, he's deciding to do something, like Will was saying, but he was, like, talking about how he has a bald spot in the middle of his hair. He's probably nervous. He's like, oh, I'm old, like, they're gonna think I'm, like, that's how I think of it. Like, his reason why he doesn't want to do it is because he thinks he's too old. Like, and I feel like, this might not be right, but talking about, like, the social gathering kind of thing, maybe he's, like, deciding whether or not to, like go and be involved in it.
Right,
Or, like,
and he's worried about the bald spot, like you said, and the hair thinning. And there's obviously this huge concern about growing older, about the aging process, about not having enough time left to do whatever he's going to do. But then he convinces himself. Yeah, Kate.
It's like after, but like once I got to this point, the rest of the poem just seemed to like scream carpe diem at me.
Right. Or this is what happens if you don't carpe diem, right? This is what happens if you ignore all that advice from the movie and the poems we read yesterday, because you will just be sitting there with your hair growing bald thinking, there's time yet for 100 decisions and indecisions and visions and revisions. Andrew?
He just seems like so self-conscious about himself. When he says they will say how his hair is growing thin, but how his arms and legs are thin, like, it's just making it worse, like, not like whether or not make the decision or not.
And Andrew used the term self-conscious here. If you asked me what this poem is about, I would tell you it is an exploration into the mind's self-consciousness, into indecision about big things, about little things, about anything. Because do I dare disturb the universe? It can be him watching women come and go and wishing he would have talked to them. That's the easiest way to access this poem, right? Thinking of a guy who likes a girl who's too afraid to say anything. But it also gets even more minute and specific than that very general, that very like relatable topic of, oh, you have a crush on somebody but you don't say anything because you're self-conscious, you're afraid.
You screwed.
Right? And that's where I see why I think that In the Room, Women Come and Go, talking to Michelangelo is the access point, because it gives you an image of a guy watching women go by and continually not talking to any of them. Poor dude. Yeah.
I was just kind of thinking how he's saying how like anything could happen anytime because it's like just the world and like anything could happen, and he's kind of confused on like should he even do anything because he's so insignificant for everything that's going on.
Right. And yeah, he's worried that he's so insignificant, but paradoxically, this worry, this self-consciousness, also raises this idea of self-importance. Do I dare disturb the universe? Like, is there some selfishness in being self-conscious? What is implied by thinking that this, whatever your indecision is going to disturb the universe? Yeah.
Like, you have such an impact on the world that if you don't do it, you're doing everybody else basically you're not helping anyone else by not doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
You are such a big impact and so important in this world that without you,
Right.
people would have no idea what to do.
Yeah. I mean, any self-consciousness ultimately starts to squeeze the world into just your own head. Because most things, if you do them, are not as important to anybody else as they are to you. You know, especially this idea of him talking to a girl that he likes. And again, that's nowhere explicitly put in here, but I think it's a good way to access the poem. And there's a lot of ways, and all of them are just sort of, you know, events of indecision that can help you access the poem. So think about that. When I decide to do something, do I dare disturb the universe? There's something self-aggrandizing about that. And there's something that suggests that everybody lives in their own universe too, right? That your perspective is the perspective for you, and everybody else is sort of a minor character in your protagonist's narrative. You know?
I mean, that's kind of how it works, you know? Like you're the person that is living your life, so you obviously see yourself as the main character in this story, no matter who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you don't really do much, you're still significant because you are still you and you're a person.
Yeah, but I got news for you, Josh. You're just a minor character in my story.
And you're just a minor character in my story.
And you cease to exist after I go home.
Yay!
But anyway, I love that line, do I dare disturb the universe? For in a minute there is time for decisions and revisions, which a minute will reverse. So has this been a guy who has disturbed the universe in his lifetime? Because remember, he's at the end of his life, it feels like. Or not at the end of his life, but he's aging, and he's dealing with the aging process. How do we know he has not disturbed the universe too much? Will?
He hasn't disturbed the universe because he's thinking about, I think we can assume that he's like thinking of talking to a girl that he has feelings for, and if that's the biggest way he's disturbed the universe, or would be, if he did it, then he hasn't done much.
Right. Because the two outcomes of this disturbance of the universe would be no thanks, or okay. Right?
It's not very disturbing.
it's you know, but that's how this self-consciousness can make you feel, right? This, do I dare disturb the universe? Do I do this thing? And we can tell that he hasn't done that because he convinces himself not to do it. There will be time. There will be time yet for 100 indecisions and 100 visions and revisions. And then he also says, for I have known them all already, known them all, have known the evenings, mornings, afternoons. I have measured out my life with coffee spoons. How else has he mentally wrapped his head around, you know, this decision, whatever it is, any decision? When he's saying, I have known them all already, what is he referring to, Josh?
Well, he's saying that he's already waited for a long time.
I see this in a different way, actually. Will?
He's already made his decision. Almost.
Yeah, so what are the them? What has he already known?
He always knows the decisions or.
What do you do when you're making when you have a difficult decision? What do you do?
I think it's he almost knows like the outcomes of like how
Right.
things gonna go.
So when you have a decision to make, you think about the two possible outcomes, right? Now, the outcomes might be based on your reality or your past, but the truth is, when you're imagining these outcomes, it is imagination.
Yeah.
It's not truth necessarily.
One choice could have many different outcomes.
But look what he is saying about this. Do I dare disturb the universe? Well, I have known them all already, known them all. I've known the evenings, mornings, afternoons. I have measured out my life with coffee spoons.
That sounds so lonely.
Yeah.
It's almost like, why should I do this if I already know the possible
Yeah.
outcomes that are going to happen?
I already thought of every possible outcome. I've known them all already. I have, and this is one of my favorite metaphors. I've measured out my life with coffee spoons. It's like really mundane, ordinary thing of just like perfectly measuring out everything you're doing and making sure the right amount of sugar or whatever, or coffee or whatever goes into the bowl, and approaching your life that way without ever taking any sort of a risk. With, looking at decisions purely by like, I need to figure out every scenario and then probably do nothing. Because he's a patient eater eyes upon a table.
Yikes.
But what sort of life does that lead him to?
Boring.
Monotonous, boring. He's playing out the consequences of his entire life and then doing nothing with his actual life while his hair grows bald. Yeah.
I think this almost kind of goes back to that the Latin.
Yeah, I was
part in the
hoping someone
beginning.
would bring us back to
Because it
Dante.
was like, it's almost like he's describing how he's in his mind, he's almost in his own he's created his own hell for
Exactly.
himself. So.
Very good, very good.
Yeah.
All right, so let's keep going. There's a lot in here. And I have known the eyes already, known them all. And now you kind of got the idea of what this I have known them all already means. This, excusing yourself from making decisions by deciding that, why ask a girl out? She'll probably say no anyway.
Yeah.
Or we'll break up eventually. I keep using that example because it just seems like the easiest indecision example.
Yeah.
But it gets even more specific here with his indecisiveness. I have known the eyes already, known them all. The eyes that fix you in a formulated phrase, and when I am formulated sprawling on a pin, when I am pinned down and wriggling on the wall, then how should I begin to spit out all the butt ends on my days and ways? And how should I presume? What does presume mean? What? No, that's resume. You know what presumptuous means?
Assuming.
If you are presumptuous, you assume something is going to go a certain way. So how should I presume? Why should I think this is going to go well, basically is what he's saying. And I have known the arms already, known them all. Arms that are braceleted and white and bare, but in the lamplight down with light brown hair. Is it perfume from a dress that makes me so digress? Arms that lie along a table or wrap about a shawl. And then how should I then presume? And how should I begin? Shall I say, I have gone at dusk through narrow streets and watched the smoke that rises from the pipes of lonely men in shirt sleeves leaning out of windows. I should have been a pair of ragged claws scuttling across the floors of silent seas. And the afternoon, the evening sleeps so peacefully, smoothed by long fingers, asleep tired or it malingers, stretched on the floor here beside you and me. Should I, after tea and cakes and ices, have the strength to force the moment to its crisis? But though I have wept and fasted, wept and prayed, though I have seen my head grown slightly bald, brought in upon a platter, I am no prophet, and here's no great matter. I have seen the moment of my greatness flicker, and I have seen the eternal footman hold my coat and snicker. And in short, I was afraid. Yeah, we got some hands. Huh?
Just going back to the first stanza, we talked about the arms that are braceleted and white and bare. I thought that was referring to a hospital, kind of going back to the patient on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And then he also kind of brings it up again with arms that lie along the table.
Yeah. I also think, giving that human form is still establishing maybe who this you is, and it still makes us sort of think that maybe it is a human female that he is afraid to talk to in some way. Sam?
Like, for the arms, it's like, he believes he's seen, like, everything. Like, there's no need to do this.
Yeah.
I've seen it all.
I've seen arms.
I've seen all the different types of arms.
Yeah.
And, the last thing I read
I've
is
seen
like,
every type of arm.
So what's the
There's
point
no
of-
use in me ever seeing another arm again.
And then like, he's talking about, like, I think in the last stanza that you read, he's talking about, I've seen the moment of my greatness flicker. He's
Oh,
seen
yeah.
himself die, because he's thought so many different ways that he could possibly die. He's like, oh, I know how it's gonna end.
Mm-hmm.
He thinks he would be afraid of it, but then at the end, he still was afraid of it.
That verse reminds me of also the one from the Robert Herrick poem yesterday, of once a person's past his prime, I have seen the moment of my greatness flicker. Demi?
I really like the line where it says there should have been a pair of
Ragged
ragged
claws.
claws spinning against the floors of the silent sea, because it really shows that he wanted to do
Mhm.
something and go out there, but he's too like self-conscious.
It's also a great example of the repetition of sounds and how that has an effect, scuttling across the floors of the silent seas. It's difficult to say because you're saying yes so many times in the sentence. Will?
I also like how like the author put this in, and it's kind of really interesting because though I've seen my head grown slightly bald, brought in upon a platter, and how they put grown slightly bald in kind of parentheses to kind of like idolize this self-consciousness that
Mhm.
like you can't even just say I've seen my head, it's bald still.
Right.
So
Someone, oh, go ahead, good.
When he's talking about I should have been a pair of ragged claws scuttling across the floor of the silent seas. It's like, it's a pretty sad line because that's how he sees himself as like a monster.
Yeah.
That's like isolated from the world.
Right. Somebody who doesn't have a choice to rise above,
Yeah.
you know, the deepest depths that we know on Earth, right? Will?
I interpret that line as like, he doesn't think that he's good enough as a person, because, like, he doesn't think he's worthy to be a human, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he doesn't, right? I am no great prophet, and here's no great matter. I've seen the moment of my greatness flicker. But then he finishes with this, in short, I was afraid. And so realizing it's his own inability to take a risk that leaves him so unsatisfied with himself. You also start to get these images of our modern society that he feels bored with, or make him feel sort of this pointlessness of modern life. Should I, after teas and cakes and ices, have strength to force the moment to its crisis? So he like engages in all these polite societal parties, right? He's drinking tea, he watches the women come and go, he eats tea, drinks tea and eats cake and something with ices, but he can't force the moments to its crisis. He can't actually do anything. He just sort of like, you know, rolls through life. And would it have been worth it after all? Remember that question at the end of the stanza. Would it have been worth it after all? After the cups, the marmalade, the tea, among the porcelain, among some talk of you and me, would it have been worthwhile to have bitten off the matter with a smile, to have squeezed the universe into a ball, to roll it towards some overwhelming question, to say, I am Lazarus, come from the dead, come back to tell you all, I shall tell you all. If one settling a pillow by her head should say, that is not what I meant at all. That is not it at all. And would it have been worth it after all? Would it have been worthwhile after the sunsets and the dooryards and the sprinkled streets, after the novels and the teacups, after the skirts that trail along the floor, and this and so much more? It is impossible to say just what I mean, but as if a magic lantern threw the nerves and patterns on a screen, would it have been worthwhile if one setting a pillow or throwing off a shawl and turning toward the window should say, that is not it at all. That is not what I meant at all. Jameson?
From the I am Lazarus, come from the dead part, I was like, I wasn't sure who Lazarus.
First of all, what kind of literary device is this?
Look up. Oh, illusion. Alright. So I looked it up, and Lazarus was a man who befriended Jesus in the Bible, and Jesus revived him. And Lazarus also means God has helped.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking maybe he was trying to revive his spirit and like trying to raise up his.
Yeah. Anyone have another opinion on that? Andrew?
Yeah, like I thought when he said that, it was like he was trying to tell himself, he was trying to tell himself he couldn't do this, but by saying that he was like, maybe I could like go after this after all.
Mhm.
Then he kind of goes back to that scene, like
Yeah.
wondering if he could and what would have happened.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. I still want to finish the Lazarus thing. I always see that as like this guy Lazarus, he's dead, right? He has enough conviction to come back from the dead. You get the idea that if Prufrock were dead and had the option, he'd be like,
Meh.
I don't know. Like, would it be a good idea to come back from the dead? Should I do this? Should I not do this? If I stay dead, this will happen. If I come back to life, this will happen. But Lazarus comes back and says, I am Lazarus, come from the dead. Prufrock, he realizes he'd never have enough conviction to even do that. And he sets up these two stanzas with this, and would it have been worth it after all? And then he lists these really mundane, typical activities. This whole poem is so full of these, like, typical modern society mundane activities, right? I've measured off my life with coffee spoons, tea and cakes, and then he talks about some talk of you and me among the porcelain. What else? Marmalade, cups. Yeah.
So he's saying, would it be worth it? Is he saying like, would it have been worth it for him to come out? Is that what he's saying?
To come out.
Like and say that he doesn't want this life.
Would it have been worth it after all? Well, look how it finishes. So would it have been worth it after all? Skip all the things he says in between. If one, setting a pillow by her head, should say, that is not what I meant at all, that is not it at all. So would it have been worth it if this girl says no? And not just says no, but points out that he misinterpreted something, right? And so he wants to interpret this thing perfectly. And you know how that feels, right?
Yeah, right
Budding young adolescents. A look, something somebody says. You don't want to misinterpret it. So you figure out exactly if it was exactly what you meant before you make your decision, before you make your move, before you do anything at all. Some of you. Jackson?
For the would it be worth it part, well, it's like in Dead Poet Society, when you read the poem to her, you can't what happened. It's like, I wrote to her, what'd you say? I was like, nothing. And I did it.
Right. And that's why I love that line in Dead Poet Society. Right. It didn't matter that she didn't say anything to him. He's just glad he did it. Because this is what happens to you if you don't. No, I am not Prince Hamlet, nor was meant to be. I'm an attendant lord, one that will do to swell progress, start a scene or two, advise the prince, no doubt, an easy tool, deferential, glad to be of use, polite, politic, cautious and meticulous, full of high sentence but a bit obtuse, at times indeed almost ridiculous, almost at times the fool. I grow old, I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled. Shall I part my hair behind? Do I dare to eat a peach? I shall wear white flannel trousers and walk upon the beach. I have heard the mermaids singing each to each. I do not think that they will sing to me. I've seen them riding seaward on the waves, combing the white hair under the waves blown back. When the wind blows the water white and black, we have lingered in the chambers of the sea by sea girls wreathed with seaweed red and brown till human voices wake us and we drown. Will?
I kind of like the line where it's like, full of high sentence but a bit obtuse, at times indeed almost ridiculous, almost at times the fool, he's like almost at times the one being.
So we're talking about earlier. Josh and I are talking about being the feeling like the protagonists in our own story. Stop packing up, please. Feeling like the protagonists in our own story, right? Well, he comes and says, "I'm not Prince Hamlet." He's not the main character. Yeah.
I feel like the way that last stanza ends, and then we drown, the last line, is a super depressing way to end with supposedly a love song.
Yeah. It's not much of a love song, is it? Because his love song never has a recipient. Eddie?
Like the whole like mermaid thing, like mermaids, like you think of mermaids, it's like most times it's like a happy like on the beach, all it, but of course it's turned into I don't think they'll sing to me. Like,
I don't think they'll
anything.
sing to me. Yeah. Andrew.
Well, this poem like kind of relates to the last poem, like to the virgins make much of time, because this guy was just like sitting around trying to find out if he should talk to this girl, and then he ended up wasting his entire life.
Right. And you get this feeling that he's gotten to the end, and his indecision is not just about women anymore, right? I grow old, I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled. Like he found a little piece of, like, oh, maybe I should wear my pants this way. And he gets to this final point, which is another central line to the poem. What's the one thing he questions at the end? Do I dare to eat a peach? And at this point, you're probably so frustrated with him that all you want to do is shake him and say, Prufrock, man, just eat the stupid peach.
Eat the peach. Just a peach.
Could you actually imagine being caught up in that much indecision? Like, you cannot make your mind up about
Now,
it.
sit down. Have you ever had a moment where you're sitting in a restaurant and looking at the menu and you're like, which
Well, yeah,
one?
but it only happened when there's only
I had a moment where I sat up and wondered if I should eat it or not.
I don't think I want this to go anywhere.